with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, May 25th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Brendan Ballou, author of Plunder, Private Equity's Plan to Pillage America. And later in the show, journalist Kim Kelly, whose piece in the magazine In These Times is called The Young Miners Dying of a, quote, old man's disease. Meanwhile, Ron debacle. DeSantis' audio-only presidential launch on Twitter Spaces beset by technical difficulties, as predicted by our very own Matt Leck. More on that in a bit.
Spooky foresight into the future.
Hey, you guys were talking about ghosts before the show.
Yeah.
You in touch with the paranormal?
It was a haunting from Matt.
You got to let me know where you're placing your bets, Emma, because I'm getting into sports betting now.
Wait, I want to pick your brain. Anyway. Hours before Meatball Ron signed a law changing Florida's resign-to-run requirements, just a coincidence. Meanwhile, a Quinnipiac poll shows Trump has doubled his lead versus DeSantis. Speaking of polling, 2/3 of registered California voters say Feinstein no longer fit to serve. A debt ceiling deal is reportedly close, praying for the least horrible concessions possible. House Republicans officially pass a bill to repeal Biden's student debt relief, and 2 Democrats join them. Luckily, DOA in the Senate, but they're going to try, even if the Supreme Court sides with Biden or doesn't do anything. But House Republicans failed to override Biden's veto, keeping a 2-year moratorium on solar tariffs in place. Oath Keeper's founder to be sentenced today for his role in January 6th. Up to 25 years. Hundreds of thousands lose Medicaid coverage as red states remove people from rolls. Starbucks is trying to force the union to negotiate all of the union contracts individually on a store-by-store basis. Another despicable tactic. Texas AG Ken Paxton likely committed impeachable crime, says state house investigators.
Dumpster fires popping up.
We'll talk about that probably in the fun half. Ken Klippenstein of The Intercept reports of U.S. intel murkiness surrounding potential Israeli plans to bomb Iran. Insanity.
It's hard for our intel to be definite about anything these days, it seems like.
Let's fund them more. Fighting has erupted again in Sudan, threatening the fragile, week-old ceasefire agreement. Rest in power, Tina Turner, a trailblazing talent, domestic abuse survivor who left her abuser without any money in her pocket and then became a superstar in her own right in her mid-40s. Like, truly incredible. And lastly, today marks the 3rd year since the murder of George Floyd. No federal legislation has been passed to address police brutality and systemic racism since then. All this and more on today's program. Quite a lot of headlines today. Quite a lot. I've got 15 bullet points that I just read off. That's like a record for me here.
And people will notice Emma usually goes above and beyond what Sam does for the bullet points.
I know, and
we
like
get farther in the song.
I try to fight the impulse, but there's so many little details that I want people to know. about like the crazy wrinkles to the story when just rattling off these headlines. But
it'd be nice if Sirius XM just gave us like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do a show over a bed the entire time. We could use actual music and just talk about it.
Honestly, well, that would be nice. I would love hundreds of millions of dollars to do my current job.
This job.
Yeah, it's not how it's working out. Let's get right into it then. Ron DeSantis, in the most predictable technical difficulty ever. He had, what can only be described as a catastrophic failure of a presidential announcement last night on Twitter Spaces.
To where like Elon's lower venture capital lackeys were wondering, is this a DDoS attack? No, it's your software has been crappy this entire time.
Yeah, Elon cut 75% of the workforce, and turns out that has an effect on the quality of the product. Also, because Elon's a total moron. That's part of it as well. And they apparently didn't test this before the announcement. But like, even putting the technical issues aside, how does DeSantis not have the political instincts to understand that his announcement should have visuals? Like, it shouldn't be a presidential announcement on a conference call.
If you have a voice like Morgan Freeman or someone like that, maybe you do the voice only chat for your announcement. Maybe, but yeah.
No, I mean, and even then, you'd have to have like some theatrical element
and
to
some
it.
behind the scene pictures, maybe like,
right.
Oh, here's what we are. We're in Twitter.
Some
HQ.
visual
Yes,
elements.
Exactly. We're set up at our war rooms.
I thought that there was going to be some rollout of some new like visual technology within Twitter Spaces, but no.
I was sure that wasn't going to happen.
It's like the recording. It's a Zoom recording of a conference call or of like a class that you listen to later. And that has a bunch of technical difficulties. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
Even our technical issues pale in comparison to what they went through. But it's just like, it says everything, honestly, about DeSantis, that he was so dazzled by a billionaire that he so easily ceded the power over the moment, the theatrical moment, the key moment in his presidential run, his announcement, that he ceded it over to him just completely. Because this is the moment in presidential races that you're supposed to inspire your voting base, drive the most fundraising numbers. This is immensely key to getting people to donate to your campaign, the way this kind of thing is rolled out to set the tone of your run. And beyond that, let's just be clear on the musk of it all here, on the substance of this pairing. I saw Sherilyn Ifill made this point on Twitter, and this is the point on Elon Musk. He's already a joke when it comes to free speech. We know that he's suppressing speech and helping the government of India do so to its people. But with Musk aligning himself with Ron DeSantis, who is the modern embodiment of free speech suppression in this country right now, more than any other politician in books and academia, etc., let's put the free speech branding to bed here, okay? But
I mean, this is a formation. You could see this coming, and they played coy when Elon bought Twitter, saying, okay, I'll wait till after the midterms, because that would have showed it for what it is, which is a political operation. Like, it's not really about trying to turn a profit from Twitter or something like that. This is about political messaging, which is why you had Jim Jordan's House GOP or House Judiciary GOP Twitter account say Elon Musk, who was the third?
Kanye.
Kanye, Elon, Trump.
Right,
aged
exactly.
Like fine milk.
And like I think it's interesting now that you have a lot of these guys lining up behind DeSantis, because I think DeSantis is who the establishment powers in the Republican really want. He's the new Jeb.
Oh my God!
But also from a policy standpoint, I would say just from the laboratory he created in Florida, he's transparently the most authoritarian nominee.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you can argue that Trump's anti-democratic elements are more authoritarian.
Yes, I guess in terms of like January 6th, obviously.
Yeah.
And like
Trump's
elections. And
Trump's
stuff.
impulses might be like worse or whatever, but DeSantis's are aligned with GOP projects.
He's like technocratically authoritarian in that he's in Florida he's been like efficient at dismantling people's liberties and rights.
Exactly. I worry that the coalitions behind him would create more effectiveness in terms of authoritarianism if he were to actually become president. But
I think it would be worse. I just think it'd be worse for America. I think what it would say about the country if a guy like DeSantis wins. Like Trump, I think is explainable. He was rich guy in the American culture for a long time, and the Democrats are really unpopular.
Yeah.
DeSantis is like that is a
He's a bloodless creep.
Yeah,
it's a vote
Dead
for
eyes.
hatred.
a Gitmo lawyer.
and that too. And
He's a torture overseer.
yeah, like the Republican powers that be being behind him is so key here too, because I mentioned this a lot. You know, he's a cuck for billionaires. He's a simp for them. That's why he was so dazzled by Musk and allowed him to take this over. He was doing Club for Growth fundraisers while Trump was handing out McDonald's in East Palestine. That says everything you need to know about this guy, and that why, even though he's tried very hard to appeal to the Trump base with every like culture war piece of legislation that he can, he really is just another one of these incredibly corrupt moneyed interests water boys that the Republican establishment has been churning out for years, and it's why I think he'll flame out.
And also notice his benefactors too so far is mostly every member of the PayPal mafia, you know, Elon, David Sachs. Peter Thiel still wants to support him, but he's like, maybe cool it on the culture war stuff a little bit. But if you
there's some stuff in Peter Thiel's personal life. He's got to cool his jets a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
Yes, oh my God, yeah, right.
Well,
good point, Matt.
with all of that context, let's actually hear this here, because DeSantis did end up getting to speak on the conference call presidential announcement 20 plus minutes in. At the end of when he ended up speaking from per NBC News, by the time DeSantis got to the moment his political team had spent weeks negotiating, there were fewer than 70,000 viewers remaining, a significantly smaller audience than is traditional for a major presidential launch. It started off with more people and quickly dwindled down. And when you see and hear footage from this, I guess it's not footage because it's audio only, you can probably understand why. The first one. Yeah.
That's the glitch, though.
The glitch? Yeah. This is the glitch. Sorry. Let's start with the how it sounded before DeSantis ended up actually speaking.
Let's see. So, here we go. Yeah, I think so. Just to simplify this.
This is silent.
Silence.
So yeah, clearly someone's mic input got turned off somehow.
I think we're just going to use your.
What?
Again, yeah.
In and out. Bad Wi-Fi.
People remember 2 days ago, when this was announced on the show,
We're just going to use your.
I predicted exactly this
Yes,
would happen.
yes, you did. I mean, this is like, we're not talking over anything. This is just the silence here.
So yeah, I guess how much of
There's no minute.
Okay.
It comes back for a second, though.
Okay, so we're still waiting, preparing to launch.
2,000 people in the room. All right, great. So let's see.
this is how a billionaire genius deals with it keeps crashing. Yeah, I mean,
All right, we got the vibe. All right, so that's what it sounded like for essentially over 20 minutes. Now, here, after a few minutes, this is Elon Musk introducing the esteemed Governor DeSantis to the Twitter space.
All right, well, it's certainly an incredible honor to have Governor DeSantis make this stark announcement.
This is the elevator music they're playing as he's introducing DeSantis.
vote against CRT. Vote against unions.
Take away.
Attack teachers unions. Attack Target pride displays.
Close your eyes
Okay, I mean,
and let the fascism wash over you.
there's also a point where Elon apologized and said, actually, these technical difficulties kind of show like how excited people are. And
Right. No, well, we have the public-facing numbers, and they've been put up against, like, viral videos of fails. They were dwarfed by AOC playing whatever that game was on Twitch with Hassan, Among Us. I mean, let's be real here. But on whatever substance you can glean from what DeSantis had to say, he talked about wokeness like the entire time. He said woke, spoke about COVID, talked about wokeness in Disney, got upset about the Biden administration trying to regulate Bitcoin, is what he said. So crypto reactionary.
I would ask questions about corruption and hidden funds when politicians start doing that.
Also the DeSantis, there's now a DeSantis War Room account on Twitter, and they posted sort of a 3.5-minute stump of DeSantis's audio paired with some images of him and Elon, not together, separate stock footage of him and Elon. And I thought I was watching a repeat of the same video for 3.5 minutes until I realized they just started over the B-roll 3 times throughout the video.
Right, and it's just so much Elon Musk.
It's extraordinarily.
Should we play that so people get a taste of like
let's just hear
really
let's take a look at the campaign footage.
Yes, and what, as Bradley's saying, we'll only play a bit, but you will get the gist because they repeat the B-roll.
They literally
over
just cut and paste. Like, so this is like they have the audio track and then they cut and paste the 50 seconds of video over and over again, which is like. And also, I'll notice as a producer, there's a what's called an audio waveform at the bottom of this that purports to show like DeSantis' voice going. You'll note that it doesn't correspond at all to the audio, and so they should fire whoever made this because it takes a little bit of effort in Adobe to make these waveforms correspond to the audio, but it's not actually that hard.
It's just stock audio waves.
Yeah, it's just like random.
Here we go.
Well, I am running for president of the United States to lead our great American comeback. Look, we know our country's going in the wrong direction. We see it with our eyes.
Why
we
is
feel
Elon
it in
in
our
this?
bones. Our
He's
southern
all over
borders
this.
collapse. Drugs are
He's in
pouring
this
into the
movie.
country. Our cities are being hollowed out by spiking
Elon
crime.
again.
The federal government's making it harder for the average family to make ends meet and to attain
Elon
and
some more.
maintain a middle-class
Soldier
lifestyle. And our
DeSantis.
president, well, he lacks vigor, flounders in the face of our nation's challenges,
Where's the
and he takes
music?
his cues
Oh my God.
from the woke mob. I don't think it has to be this way. American decline is not inevitable. It is a choice. And we should choose a new direction, a path that will lead to American revitalization. We must.
All right, we get it. But man, they are overestimating the popularity of Elon Musk in like how that's going to activate people on the voting on the level of voting.
And you know what? All the staff is like, oh, we have the richest man in the world on our side.
Yeah.
We can't go wrong here. And, we'll see.
I love the concept of putting B-roll of like an executive who presides over a media company as you make an announcement on that platform. Like, just to say someone announces on a speech that's aired on CBS that they're going to run for president. It's just like stock footage of Les Moonves. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Anyway, clown show. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. I also want to say that we will get to later Trump's response and his trolling, which was also hilarious. But take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Brendan Ballou, who wrote the book Plunder, Private Equity's Plan to Pillage America. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Brendan Ballou, federal prosecutor who served as a special counsel for private equity in the Justice Department's Antitrust Division. And your new book is entitled Plunder, Private Equity's Plan to Pillage America. Brendan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So let's just start at the most basic level here. What is private equity? What constitutes a private equity firm? And how has private equity, as a part two, reshaped the American economy?
It's a great question. And I confess, I didn't really know what private equity was until I was about a third of the way through the project. So none of your viewers or listeners should feel bad for not being totally sure here. And I should say right off the bat, as I normally do, that this is all in my personal capacity and doesn't necessarily reflect the opinions of the Justice Department. So what is private equity? Private equity firms use a little bit of their own money, some investor money, and a whole lot of borrowed money to buy up companies. They then make financial and operational changes to those companies with the goal of selling them for a profit a few years later. So it's a very simple idea, but it has often a lot of bad consequences across industries. And to your second part of your question about sort of where is private equity having an impact, it's pretty much everywhere. Private equity firms spent over $1 trillion buying companies last year. And for context, the entire US GDP is about $25 trillion. So it's not an insubstantial part of our economy. So it's everything from going to your veterinarian or your OBGYN, going to an emergency room, going to a nursing home. Even in some cities, the very water that you drink is provided by a private equity firm. So it tends to surround us.
I mean, the nursing home example is one that I believe you start your book off with in the introduction. And it's, I would say some of our viewers may have heard this story before, but it's infamous for a reason. The Carlyle Group buying the company Manor Care for $6 billion, hollowing it out. Healthcare violation or health code violations, I should say. The care towards the nursing home patients was horrendous. Bugs and dirt, layoffs of actual staff. I mean, talk about that story in particular because it's a great example of the dynamic you describe.
Well, all those things that you described happen. Carlyle, which is one of the largest private equity firms in America, bought up Manor Care and then executed a lot of fairly standard tactics. They did what's called a sale leaseback, where they required Manor Care to sell all of the property and then lease it back to itself, which generated a quick sort of hit of cash, but now meant that Manor Care had this sort of unending obligation to pay for property it used to own. Carlyle executed transaction fees and management fees that Manor Care essentially paid for the privilege of being owned by the private equity firm. And what's really interesting to your point about this story is, there wasn't a spike in health code violations. There were complaints about bugs. When a resident actually died at the facility, her family sued for wrongful death. But this is what a really important part about, I think, what causes so many problems in private equity. When they sued for wrongful death, Carlyle was actually able to get the case against it dismissed by saying, we actually don't technically own the nursing home chain. Rather, we just advise a series of funds whose limited partners through several shell corporations ultimately own Manor Care. And that was enough to confuse the judge to get the case dismissed. And it meant that Carlyle, even though it effectively had operational control over the nursing home, wasn't going to be held responsible for the consequences.
I mean, that is shocking, I'm sure, to a lot of people, but that is a part of the structure of private equity, the fact that they just do not have legal liabilities in the way that you would expect, given the kind of overhaul that they implement at the companies that they end up buying. I mean, they also load them up with debt, and I want to talk about that piece in a second. But you're a lawyer, you work in the Justice Department. What is the legal framework that allows private equity to both have this incredibly kind of tidal wave of effect on the companies that they end up buying, but have no legal liability when it comes down to brass tacks?
So, and with anything in the law, we lawyers are annoying. There are details and nuances to this, but the basic issue is a doctrine called corporate veil piercing. So you and I, we have our, invest, to the extent we've got any retirement savings, probably invested in an index fund or something like that. And you've got stock in hundreds of different companies. Well, a really foundational idea in corporate law is you can't get sued successfully for things that those companies do. And it kind of makes sense. Like, you and I probably don't have much control over, what Walgreens or DuPont or whoever it is that you're invested in. You don't have much say over their operations. Private equity firms benefit from that same protection, yet they often have majority stakes in their companies and can effectively dictate their operations. So it's a situation where in some ways the law hasn't really caught up to the business practice yet, where these firms are able to essentially control their portfolio companies, but then if something goes wrong, they can't be successfully sued for them.
So I mean, the law needs to catch up, right? I think that's the lesson here. Like that would have to, I guess, go through Congress in that way, or is there a sense that there could be some executive action taken?
Yeah, there's a whole range of things that can happen, both on that issue and on others where sort of the private equity business model leads to often bad consequences. Congress can certainly act here, but there are a lot of different levers of power. On that specific issue, actually, it's an area where states and localities are probably more important. A lot of this is state common law, and you just need jurisdictions like Delaware, New York, California, Pennsylvania to update their laws to sort of clarify who can be held responsible. So I think that there are a lot of different areas people can look to for action.
Gotcha. Well, all right, then let's talk about a few of the other examples that you touch on as well. Some people might be aware of, like the Toys R Us example, private equity, these major private equity instances where companies went bankrupt and were bought up. J. Crew, Aeropostale is another. Friendly's was one that that hit home to my heart because that was my favorite place to go growing up on the East Coast. It's like it's a fast food chain, but ice cream sundaes and things like that. Those are the one I used to go to with my family all the time, just shuttered up. And you realize, it's because they handed the keys to private equity. And so this happens really when these companies are in a bit of financial distress, right? If you don't mind explaining kind of the circumstances behind it and then behind those examples as well.
Yeah, so maybe we can focus on Friendly's because it's
Sure.
a really interesting story. So this is a, sort of an iconic diner chain in the Northeast. It's founded by these two brothers during the Great Depression. And it becomes this regional institution. In 2007, it's bought up by a private equity firm called Sun Capital, which then executes a lot of the tactics that we were just talking about sale leasebacks and, transaction fees, management fees, and so forth. Ultimately, they drive the company into bankruptcy. But the really interesting thing that happens is Sun Capital wasn't just Friendly's owner, it was also Friendly's largest lender. And the reason that they did that is lenders often get control of a company in bankruptcy. And so Sun Capital was able to execute this move where it sold Friendly's from itself to itself, which is sort of this sort of legal magic trick. And the reason that they did that is through that bankruptcy process, they were able to push off the pension obligations that Friendly's had onto what's called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is this quasi-government agency. And so the result was Sun Capital was able to keep control of Friendly's, but now it was able to abandon the pension obligations, which is a tactic that's been tried by Sun Capital many times and by many other private equity firms, by one analysis, at least 50 different times over a 15-year period.
Where does that leave the pension funds? And we can talk more about how it's a lot of pension funds are heavily invested in private equity.
So in that case, I believe the PBGC was able to pay the outstanding pension obligations. Retirees were not so lucky in at least some companies. Sun Capital bought up Mars Supermarkets, as I understand it, for essentially warehouse workers. Their pensions were significantly cut, while the pension fund for the company's executives remained fully funded. I believe by one analysis by some folks at Harvard, pensioners have lost at least $1 billion through these sorts of deals by private equity and other firms.
It's just the fact that so many of our retirees via pension funds are subject to a lot of this insecurity is pretty concerning to me. Can you expand on that point? How this came to be, how pensions became kind of intertwined with private equity in this way?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned at the outset, private equity firms need money to buy up companies. And a lot of that comes from pension funds. So historically, the money that private equity firms get comes from pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, which are, the funds of foreign governments. There have been really interesting stories of cases where union pension funds are being used to buy up companies, and then ultimately the companies engage in sort of union busting activities. So there's sort of a snake eating its own tail sort of quality to it. I think the really interesting trend we're seeing is private equity firms are now trying to get access to 401k funds, which historically they haven't. So if you invest through, a 401k fund manager, it's possible that in the next few years, your money could be going to private equity firms and funding these sorts of acquisitions.
Again, I return to it's insane how this is legal, but I mean, how is it even legal for private equity to use so much money that just isn't theirs, right? So much borrowed money for them to make these acquisitions. I mean, it's a little bit of theirs, right? A little is investor money too, but so much of this is borrowed from things like, what you just described.
Yeah. So, the real interesting sort of magic trick of most private equity deals is it usually involves a lot of debt, but it's debt that the acquired company is responsible for paying, not the private equity firm. So, when you buy a company like Toys R Us and use several $1 billion to do it, most of that money is going to be money that Toys R Us has to borrow. And if Toys R Us fails, the private equity firm can nominally walk away. And in fact, I believe in that case, the private equity firms more than made back their own particular investment, even though the company failed. I think why is so much debt being used? Historically, it's been because there have been such low interest rates, set in part by the Federal Reserve. So there's been an enormous amount of cheap money sort of floating around. Now that interest rates are going up, I think we may see sort of more instability in private equity acquisitions. And, some of these deals might start looking bad, and, private equity firms might struggle to unload them or sell them to other companies.
What are some of the ramifications of that you would predict as, because we've had how many interest rate hikes? Nearly 10 at this point since the start of the pandemic?
That's a really quick, I'm a humble lawyer. That's really a question for more a financial expert. But I will say, it's interesting. And just in the trade reporting, you're seeing that private equity firms are struggling to offload companies in a way that they weren't just a few years ago. So, it could mean more instability for private equity portfolio companies, more bankruptcies and so forth. The interesting thing is private equity firms, portfolio companies, at least according to one study, were already 10 times as likely to go bankrupt as comparable businesses not owned by private equity firms. So, you may see a further increase in that.
I wanted to ask you a bit more about the notion of financialization and how private equity companies have been so instrumental in the financialization of our economy, much more money, a disproportionate amount, I guess, since maybe the 80s and 90s going to the finance sector, right? What is that? How does private equity play a role in that? And what are some of the effects on our economy when it's so heavily financialized in that way?
Yeah. So, there's really interesting research about how, when the financial aspect of an economy becomes sort of too large, it's actually a drag on the overall effect of the economy rather than a benefit. And the United States has sort of long surpassed that, according to some research. I think the short version of this is that basically after the financial crisis of 2008, the investment banks all converted into what are called bank holding companies. And from a regulatory perspective, just became a lot less interesting. They became much more conservative institutions. And private equity really took on the mantle of the investment banks to such an extent that private equity firms are really expanding well beyond private equity. They're buying up the hedge fund units of investment banks. They're expanding into infrastructure, life sciences. Private credit is a huge thing. There's a really interesting quote from an analyst, the effect of which was Blackstone, the leading, by some measures, the largest private equity firm. He says, Blackstone reminds me of Goldman Sachs a decade ago. Wherever something interesting is happening, that's where they are. And that's reflected in the pay. The head of Blackstone made 10 times as much as the head of Goldman Sachs last year. And I don't think the CEO of Goldman Sachs is terribly underpaid. To add one last thing to a rather long answer here, I think maybe the most interesting expansion in sort of financialization is that private equity firms are getting very involved into buying up insurance companies. And that's an area where they are buying up these businesses and potentially investing sort of insurance policyholders' money in sort of more risky or more opaque investments, which could have interesting effects.
I mean, certainly, and just it creates a level of instability where the economy is just it's floating above the rest of us, right? Where these decisions and the instability is happening within this sector, but like with so much of that money, I mean, you said $1 trillion spent buying companies in the last year when our GDP is 25 trillion. Like that creates. I mean, that contributes to income inequality is probably the short answer that I'm talking my way towards.
Yeah, no, I mean there are more. I'll have to remember the statistic. I believe that there are more people working in private equity making $100 million who have $100 million or more than there are people in all the rest of the financial industry and all professional athletes combined. So there, private equity is certainly a contributor to, a handful of people becoming exceedingly wealthy.
Yeah, certainly. We've been covering child labor on the show before, and this is kind of an example from the news more recently, but we highlighted how Packers Sanitation Services has been bought and sold by private equity funds, and they were just caught in this horrific child labor scandal where they had children working in slaughterhouses and cleaning them in these really hazardous conditions. And of course, they're undocumented children, so there's like much less oversight. But can you expand on how private equity can encourage different like lack of oversight or cutting of corners in those ways, which can contribute to obviously some horrific things, which I'd put child labor in that category.
So I can't comment on that specific case only because I don't know anything more than sort of what's been publicly reported. It sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is private equity firms can often own businesses without having legal responsibility for a lot of their operations. I think probably the paradigmatic example of this sort of writ large is nursing homes. So according to one study, private equity ownership of nursing homes is responsible for an estimated 20,000 premature deaths over a 15-year period. And in part, I suspect the reason for that is private equity firms are able to buy up these nursing homes, but then sort of layer them up through shell companies and disperse assets across sort of different operating businesses. The result of which is that it's very hard to hold the sort of financial entity responsible for mismanagement at nursing homes. And I've talked with plaintiff side lawyers who complain about this. They say it's too expensive, it's too complicated for us to figure out sort of what the private equity firm's role is in these nursing homes. And I suspect that that's an issue that's sort of happening across industries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. That's got to have this chilling effect on, like, tort law, right? Or any way for these plaintiffs to recoup some damages. That probably is a huge, like, that's the benefit, I guess, for a lot of these very wealthy people in this situation.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. There were presentations in the nursing home industry about how to distribute your assets across multiple different companies to make it hard for plaintiffs to actually recover. So you'll have sort of the nursing home company, but then you'll have an operating company, a staffing company, a supplying company. And it means that, people don't know who to sue. They don't know how much assets are actually around. And they're going to struggle to recover.
Lastly here, some of the other examples you cite, prisons, mobile homes. Do you mind just talking quickly about some of those?
Yeah. So I think one of the really interesting discoveries for me is that oftentimes private equity firms target industries that don't serve the very rich, but rather service the working class or poor. And that feels a little ironic because if you're in the business of making money, you'd think you'd go after the rich people. But oftentimes, I think private equity firms target businesses where people really don't have an alternative. And I don't think anything is sort of more indicative of that than prison services and mobile homes, where private equity firms have gotten very active in buying prison phone companies, prison healthcare, prison commissary and cafeteria services, even the debit cards that you get when you leave prison. I think to hopefully end on a hopeful note, I've been incredibly impressed by the work of activists who have been enormously successful in sort of drawing attention to private equity's role in prison services and prison phone companies specifically, and have passed legislation in cities and states, and now recently at the federal level to potentially regulate some of these actions. So, we've been talking about a lot of really concerning trends, but I also think that there's real hope and real action that's going on too.
It's always good to end on a hopeful note there. Brendan Ballou, the book is called Plunder, Private Equity's Plan to Pillage America. We'll put a link to the book in the description wherever you're listening to or watching this. Brendan, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. All right, guys, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Kim Kelly. We are back, and we are joined by Kim Kelly, labor journalist, author of the book Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor. But today we're talking about her piece in the magazine In These Times called The Young Miners Dying of an Old Man's Disease. That part's in quotes. Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me and for giving me the space to talk about this crisis.
It really is a crisis. That's how we titled it in the show today. And I'm blown away by your piece. Everyone should really check it out. It's incredible journalism, and we will link to it, obviously. But I was just shocked to see just how astronomical the rates of increase in black lung for coal miners in particularly Kentucky and West Virginia. How rapidly that has increased, both in terms of the number of miners that are experiencing the effects of black lung, and also just how quickly they're being diagnosed with it, given to relative to how long they've worked in the mines. So just introduce our audience to what's happening really to these miners in the states that you covered, Kentucky and West Virginia.
Sure. So this is it's a heartbreaking situation, and it's something that is not news to folks in those areas, right? In these coal communities, specifically in Central Appalachia. Like, they know this is going on, but outside of that world, the last like the most recent time most people have heard about black lung is like Zoolander, right? Like, it's something that we think of in black and white. But unfortunately, over the past 10, 15 years, even longer, really, but that specific time frame, this disease, which is it's a colloquial term for coal workers' pneumoconiosis, which is just a horrible, incurable, progressive disease that attacks the lungs and eventually chokes you to death, as one miner described it to me. It's something that's been around for a long time, but the rates really went down after the passage of the 1977 Mine Safety Act, because that There are regulations put in place. There's safety measures. There was all these different programs and infrastructure put in place to protect miners from inhaling as much of that dangerous coal dust. But now fast forward a few years, a few dozen years, we're at a point where, those storied Central Appalachian coal seams, the ones that, generations of robber barons used to extract blood, sweat, coal, and money out of those Appalachian populations, those seams are getting thinner. And so now the miners have to dig through much more rock, sandstone, which is laden with quartz and with silica. And silica is the problem here. I spoke to a number of medical experts who have been studying this. Who are like, yeah, no, that's the number one issue. Like, there are a couple contributing factors to this crisis, but number one is the silica, because silica is 20 times more toxic than coal dust. It just tears you up. It causes so much more damage, so much more quickly. And so we're seeing a resurgence of Black lung in its most progressive forms among people who have only spent 10, 15, 20 years in the mines. And sure, that sounds like a very long time. Like, that's a full career for most people. But when you take into account that some of these folks, and all genders, but mostly men, some of these men, they started going down the mines when they left high school. 20 years takes you to about my age. Like, there's men, I'm 35, there's men my age, a little younger, a little older, who are now struggling with this age-old curse. And it's just wrenching to see. Like, in this investigation I did for In These Times, I spoke to a number of different miners, but I've profiled a man named John Moore, who is just this wonderful, hardworking family man. He's 42 years old. He started working in the mines 10 years ago because he wanted to make more money for his family. Very standard situation in Central Appalachia, in West Virginia, where he's from. And now he's 42 years old, and he has 3 young children, and he has the most advanced form of Black lung, of just this chronic pulmonary disease. He's also at high risk for heart failure. He's in really bad shape, and he's 42, and he's not alone. And so I really wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to have the support from In These Times and the platform to help tell this story and help get this out there, because it's just something that we can't afford to forget. Like, these folks cannot afford to be forgotten, because that's something that has happened to coal country and the people that live and work there for a real long time. But this is, I think it's kind of grim and almost splashy enough that it's been getting a little bit of attention since I put this story out. And that's a good thing, because we need a really big response to this. We can't just let this fester, because already too many young lives have been lost because coal bosses would rather make money than follow regulations, and Republican politicians would rather cut regulations than actually help the coal miners they like to drag out for photo ops.
Yeah, and I want to get to that, the regulatory aspect, in a second. But I just wanted to expand on just the sheer numbers of this. I wrote this down from your piece, that Black lung affects more than 1 in 8 coal miners in Kentucky and West Virginia who have been working in the mines for 20 to 24 years. That is up from 1 in 30 a decade ago for that same time frame and rate. And that is because of what you describe here, silica, which is this, the dust that now they're breaking into as they go deeper and deeper to find coal when they're mining. If you don't mind just explaining how we got to this point where, politicians have been talking about clean coal for so many years and how we're trying to phase this industry out. And yet, there's still these mining efforts that are incredibly dangerous in order to keep, honestly, the industry afloat for some bosses.
So the thing about, and I've been thinking about this too in some of the reactions, because when I tweeted my piece out, and Twitter being Twitter, not all the reactions are great. And some of them said, oh, we'll just shut down the coal mines, problem solved. I was like, okay, well, that sounds really simple when you put it like that. And don't think about the fact that people have families to support and lives to make it through. But one little piece of that, and of course I'm not like a pro coal person at all, obviously it's killing my friends, but one thing that I think is important to recognize about this specific part of the conversation is that a lot of the coal being mined is metallurgical coal, which is used to make coke, which is used to make steel. they're not keeping the lights on. They're mining materials that are used for industrialization and for construction projects and basically to build the cleaner infrastructure we need. So it's not as simple as flipping a switch and like, okay, we're done, everyone's fine now. And really one of the things that, and in terms of regulations and how we got here, we've known that silica is a problem since the 70s. Like that, this isn't a surprise. There is much more stringent regulation for construction workers, for just like the general silica like regulation, like allowable amount of respirable silica that the federal government has. Like that, they have a silica standard, but coal mines are exempt. They don't have their own standards. So right now they're operating under a standard that allows them to breathe in double what's allowable for any other type of worker in this country. And the conditions in those coal mines, I spoke to so many miners and safety experts about, well, why? Like, we know this is a problem. Mine bosses know this is a problem. Why wouldn't they want to keep their workforce healthy and not have to basically have guys dropping like flies? And it comes down to the fact that it takes more time to enact the proper safety regulations, to hang curtain, to make sure the ventilation plans are up to date, just to follow the rules, to follow the existing rules and existing protections that are afforded to miners that people know work. It takes a little bit more time, and that time takes away from profit. Every minute you spent working on safety measures and making sure you and the other guys are okay, that's a moment that you're not mining coal. And guess what the mine bosses care the most about? They can always find another coal miner, and it's so much of it comes down to greed. Like none of this is a secret, especially in places like West Virginia. The coal bosses know that they could prevent this. That's something that was hammered home by so many people I spoke to, including like the acting official at MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, Chris Williamson. Like he's like, this is preventable if they follow the rules, if the proper precautions are followed. Like, nobody needs to get black lung. Like, this doesn't need to be happening, but it is, because some people care more about money than they do about human lives.
And now we can, touch more on that regulatory aspect. You write about how the MSHA, I'm forgetting, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, they are known for kind of going easy on the industry in this way when they cut corners or they don't follow the guardrails that are already threadbare as is. Can you talk about that dynamic a bit, Kim?
Yeah, I have some sympathy for MSHA now, especially because they have Assistant Secretary Williamson at the helm. I believe that he cares, and he told me, I've interviewed him multiple times on and off record about how like this is his priority. He's from West Virginia. His granddad was a coal miner. He actually cares. But Chris Williamson hasn't been in charge of MSHA the whole time, right? Like it is something that I learned while I was reporting this and speaking to folks that have been following this longer than I have. And obviously, like, shout out to the folks who've been covering this longer than me, because there is a lot of great reporting on this issue. I'm just kind of working from where we are now with the latest data. But something that is just so frustrating and so obvious too is the fact that it all depends on who is in office, who's in charge. Because even as early as the Obama administration, MSHA was working on a new silica standard. That was a rule they were trying to advance. They were trying to do something about this. And essentially, the way it was described to me was that they ran out of time because then he was out of office. And then Trump came in. And this is a tidbit that it's just so indicative of how little Republicans actually care about the people they use as avatars of good Americans. When Trump got in, he got to appoint his MSHA assistant secretary, the guy to run MSHA, the agency, and he picked a former coal executive who spent his tenure there not advancing the silica rule, not looking into ways to increase miner safety, but looking into how to make regulations less burdensome burdensome
There we go.
for the mine bosses.
Yeah.
Like he spent 4 years that could have been used to address this issue, that could have been used to save people, trying to figure out how to cut more regulations so his coal boss buddies could make more money. And think of how many times that must have happened since the 70s, how many administrations we've had, some that pretend to care about coal miners and don't do anything, some that don't even bother to care about them. Like, this is such a specific issue that it wouldn't take that much effort to do something about it. You just need the political will and a little bit of elbow grease, right? Like, MSHA has been, I think like a lot of smaller federal agencies, it has a big remit and a small budget. They're understaffed. Like they could be doing so much more already, but they need more staff, they need more funding. If they want to be out there conducting all the necessary mine inspections and actually levying real fines, or like hell, throwing coal bosses in jail, they need the budget and they need the teeth, right? Like,
well, this is why, I mean, like, this is a great example for people that say there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans, and we're progressive on the show, right? But like, and we hit Biden from the left, but this is an example. The administrative state, these smaller agencies that don't get a ton of recognition or spotlight, are immensely important to keeping people safe. As are unions, which is a transition into another angle that you hit on in your piece, how there has been this incredible decline of unions in Central Appalachia, and that you can connect that directly to these corners being cut, because there are mines in other areas of the country, right, where it's just there are still issues, but when there's more unionization in places like you talk about Alabama or Pennsylvania in these industries, the black lung numbers are, you can see how there's a difference.
Absolutely. And this is something that it was, of course, I'm a little biased. I'm a big union person, right? But it was something that just became so apparent too as I was researching for this piece and talking to people, whether it was Barbara Ellen Smith, who's this brilliant scholar who wrote a book called Digging Our Own Graves. There's a new edition that came out in 2020 that digs into this crisis from that angle specifically. Or just talking to UMWA officials, or talking to miners in Pennsylvania and Alabama, even Utah, and just ask them, hey, like, this is what I'm researching. What have you observed? Like, we're around the same age. Like, is this something you've experienced? What's going on? And everyone in those areas has been like, like, my granddaddy or like my great uncle, like that's something he's dealt with, but that's just not something that we're worrying about, because first, like geologically speaking, like the situation is a little different somewhere like Alabama or PA, but not that much. It really comes down to the fact that places that have strong unions are able to enact, like, make sure the rules are followed. They're able to create mine safety committees that actually pay attention and actually do their job. They're able to work with MSHA inspectors. They're able to let workers know that, if you're having an issue, we have your back. You can talk to someone. You're not just going to get fired. You're not going to be retaliated against because we have a contract. You have legal rights. There is a provision in the Mine Safety Act, Part 90, that allows and explicitly says miners, if you are experiencing symptoms, if you have black lung, if you're having this issue, you have a legal right to be moved to a less dusty, safer part of the mine and to keep your job and to not be penalized. That is a legal right that miners have under this legislation, but not very many of them take it, because in places like Central Appalachia, where the unions have been busted so thoroughly for decades, if not centuries, people are afraid of getting fired and retaliated against. If no one is there to make sure that that law is followed, and you feel like you're on your own, you're probably just going to keep going to work and breathing in that silica dust. Because if the choice is, maybe get sick and deal with that, or continue to provide for my family, a lot of folks are going to make the choice that they've made for hundreds and hundreds of years, like John Moore, the person that I profiled in this piece. He could feel himself getting sicker, but he just wrote it off as asthma because he had 3 kids to support and he wanted them to have a good life. He didn't want them to have to struggle the way he did. And I think it's so commendable, and it's just also so sad that so many workers are faced with that impossible choice.
Absolutely. For our audience, lastly here, Kim, if they wanted to help, I don't even know if this is possible, but like with healthcare costs, if there's anything happening, like a GoFundMe or anything, like what would be the best way to support?
I don't think John Moore would accept that kind of help. He's very pro-man, but there is something coming up. So MSHA has been working on getting this silica rule through Congress. I'm not a policy guy, so I've had to learn a lot about all that stuff too. Seems like a nightmare. But they are trying to get this silica rule in place, and that will have an impact. That will matter. And there is going to be a public comment portion for that rule. It's coming up. It's not open yet, but I think the way it works is anybody can write in and say, hey, this is a good thing. Hey, I support this. So I'll keep following up on it. If you're the kind of nerd that checks on regulatory agendas and sees the silica rule public comment open, please tell them that it matters. And also, like, if you have friends or family in those areas, or who are minors in general, or even who just have these dangerous jobs, just tell them, like, you really should wear your respirator, even if it sucks. You really should do everything you can to keep yourself safe, because, it's not a black and white pickaxe over the shoulder, let me go get the mule type of disease. It's my friend Chuck, who is 2 years older than me, can't breathe very well anymore type of issue.
Right. Well, you can just send me a message if any of that kind of stuff comes up, and I'll make sure to highlight it. Kim Kelly, you can read this piece over at In These Times magazine, which you should be reading regardless, to check on labor actions and things like that. Kim also wrote a book called Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor. Thanks so much, Kim, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. All right, guys, with that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program, head into the fun half. The number is 646-257. We'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs. Norway Bay writes in, I hope the fun half is extra fun today. Holy crap, rough listen today. Very interesting, but damn rough. Yeah, that's we will make it extra fun. We definitely will. So looking forward to that. Matt, what's happening in Left Reckoning?
Well, if you want extra fun, Emma Vigeland will be on Left Reckoning this Sunday, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We're going to look back at some critique Emma got for she loves crime and wants to see more of it on her way to work every day because it makes her feel like a revolutionary.
Exactly. I get to cosplay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some sorts of things, including a recent thing where it's like everyone acts like this is normal, and they're all scared of a video of a black guy listening to his AirPods dancing on the subway.
Yeah, right.
So like this sort of panic. It's interesting.
That was insane. I was like, what are people noticing here?
Read the replies to me.
This whole thing is insane, but there's you talk about like social media. This is not just Twitter. This is not just Instagram. Like I noticed this on TikTok too, that the inflammatory things, like for instance, like the city bike thing, which I think is still unclear exactly what happened there, but like that sort of content is being pushed more and more these days. Like it's really, I think. And there's a big appetite for it on the right, of like this weird sort of like people who are never in urban environments.
It's titillating for them.
Yeah, to like see like, oh, look at this area. It's entirely like either like barren or like scared. There's homeless people there. Or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, to me, like that's something that I think like social media platforms have cut down on. Like say, hey, let's not like let this thing go viral, because that's not really what we want to be about. But I feel like they're loosening on that a little bit.
Yeah, Twitter at least
is. Twitter definitely is, but I think as Twitter does it in such a egregious fashion, the other ones are doing it too in a way that I think is very suspicious.
Yeah, I think it's like this is the new version of the like John Benet Ramsey story for suburbia.
Right, like the 90s crime panic was like local news and stuff like freak you out about this. And TikTok and stuff is basically, I think like post George Floyd, you're having a reaction. And part of that, I think, is this sort of propaganda on social media, because they realize, okay, another summer's coming. We're going to get a lot of videos of cops fucking up and abusing people. We need to flood that zone actually with people being out of control and actually like situations that would imply like, oh, you need a cop there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll be talking about all of this and more. I guess we're recording it today. I can say that, right?
Yep.
And then it'll be out on Sunday. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning for that. For ESPN, we spoke about the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. We talked about the Arizona Coyotes losing the voting referendum and the NHL still trying to impose it, even though no one wants hockey in Arizona just because of, media centers and Southwestern market garbage. We also spoke about the anti-Palestinian discrimination in a lot of footy and soccer stadiums. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Check out that full episode. And also I should say that since we're off for Memorial Day and then I have a graduation to go to on Tuesday, we'll be doing an ESVN episode that Wednesday next week. Hey guys.
Hello.
And we can't hear you, Matt Binder. No.
Silence. Once again.
Shadow banned. This gives Brandon an opportunity to get the first crack at this.
Brent.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I think I heard something.
Can we hear you?
Do you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes.
All right, but Brandon's still going first.
I'm gonna fumble it back. Next episode of the Discourse should be out this weekend. There wasn't one last week because we got busy and I was on a bit of a day trip, but there should be one out this weekend.
All right. Matt Binder, what's happening on Scam Economy and Doomed?
Sure. Finally had the Scam Economy episode of my, recent dreams when I had Leo Schwartz of Fortune on to discuss WorldCoin, this amazing crypto project that basically wants to scan your eyeballs in exchange for crypto. And the reason they want you to scan your eyeballs is because they want to create a database of everyone's biometric data in the world so that one day when the AI robots take over, that's how you'll be able to tell a robot from a real person. And here's another little bonus kicker there. The backer of WorldCoin is the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman. OpenAI, the biggest AI company. They're going to be the Google of AI. They're the ones who created ChatGPT. So, he's double dipping there. He's creating the problem and he's come up with a solution for it.
I'm so scared. I like all these investors that are like, I am so worried about this thing I am invested in 4 different companies.
Right. That is fascinating. I'll be checking out that episode for sure.
Me too. I need to find out about these robots and how scanning your eyeballs or having your biometrics data on file would prevent them from.
Well, it's sort of going to be like the what Elon sells the Twitter blue check as a way to tell that someone's really human.
Yeah,
like, this is going to be the way to tell that you're really human. You're going to log into
steal
your
someone else's
websites and
eyes?
your bank account because there's unique biometric data. Here's another little spoiler. People in China are buying up people in Africa's biometric data and then providing it to WorldCoin in order to scam WorldCoin out of crypto. So this is already going wonderfully.
Crypto has done a good job of making it feel like a cyberpunk dystopia. A lot of people say we don't have enough future stuff, but the stealing people's eyes for digital currency, that feels like Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, totally. Good point.
I mean, it's not quite flying cars, but I'll take it.
I'm still waiting on that hoverboard from Back to the Future. That was always my dream, but
I do not have the balance for that.
That's the one thing I really want, and it's the one thing apparently we can't get.
I know. What the hell? They really set our expectations high, and the shoes that lace up really quickly, like robotically. Whatever. We can't get that, I guess.
Right. Well, I guess we got Vans slip-ons now. I mean,
yes, yeah. I mean, there's right. You're right. All right.
I want that skateboard though.
I know. I wear those Vans slip-ons all the time, and I think they're falling apart, but they're not even that expensive anyway. But I should get a new pair. That's just what I was thinking in my head. But no one needs to know my inside thoughts on that front. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back.
We can tell that story though that we were telling that you were saying there, Brandon, in the fun half intro thing. Go ahead.
Well, it wasn't so much of a story as we were just like recounting our favorite Elon Musk sycophants. And I was recalling the time that Matt Bender, and this is like Twitter stuff, so forgive me if you don't traffic in Twitter. You shouldn't. It's bad for your brain, apparently. When Matt Bender got
I didn't see the evidence on that.
Anyway, when Matt Bender got banned and he hosted that impromptu Twitter space, or joined, I should say, back when you were still able to do that. And then that guy, I forget which one of Elon Musk's friends was in it. And he was just like, how? And then they ended up arguing over like Elon Musk's baby being in danger from that like fake kidnapping attempt. And he was like, how would you feel if it was your baby? How would you feel if it was your baby? And I think it was the guy from one of those like Twitter acquisition text messages. And it was very jarring to just be a part of that.
They actually took down all of Twitter Spaces that night because I found that loophole, and Twitter Spaces was unavailable for a full 24 hours as they tried to fix that loophole.
It's such a stable site. I can't believe it was so unstable last night.
But that's what's funny, because Binder, I forgot your whole thing with Twitter Spaces, but like I made a prediction. I don't know if you can pull this up, Bradley, but it's not a surprise to me at all that there was technical difficulties there, because I remember back in the day, you know, that week everyone was joining Mastodon. I joined a Twitter space to hear Elon talking to that Mario Nawfal guy, and I was not able to leave that space at all that night. Like, I just couldn't. Like, every time I hit leave space, it just nothing happened, and my app would slow down. So I put my phone away, opened it up the next morning, still stuck in that space, even though it had finished like 8 hours ago. And it was like the week I'm like, I deleted the app, and then like as I was reinstalling, I'm like, if I'm still in that space, I just can't use Twitter on my phone anymore.
Yeah, right.
Luckily, reinstalling the app entirely allowed me to be able to not see that Twitter space. But that has happened twice since then. So like Twitter Spaces has been a mess for like 8 months now. It feels like.
Right. But you know what's really crazy? Like during the break, I was talking about how Twitter just removed Twitter video view counts, which tells you, like how on YouTube it shows you how people viewed a video. Well, Twitter removed that from their videos, and people are now using the tweet view count, which just shows how many impressions your tweet gets. You know, tweets show up on your feed recommended via the algorithm all the time. Doesn't necessarily mean you watched the video inside of it or even read the content in it. But people are now using that, which is not an accurate measure of how many people viewed a video, because the DeSantis campaign is out there right now flaunting that 15 million people have viewed their the DeSantis campaign announcement video on Twitter. But someone with a few people actually sent this to me. They have an old version of the Twitter for Android app, which still includes the video view count. And on that, it shows that, yes, the tweet impressions on the DeSantis video's tweet got 15 million impressions, but only 4 million people actually viewed the video. And again, on Twitter, viewing a video means you watch the video for at least 2 seconds. So
totally.
So with that, with that even aside, though, still they are fudging those numbers by 11 million additional views. It's just not
it's
an
not
accurate
true
metric.
Yeah. Well, all right, since we're already talking about it, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it here, right? So earlier in the show, we played all of the insane tech glitches from
Can we just
Ron DeSantis'
just to back up on that a little bit? We do have 2 more videos. So the first is I just want to play my prediction again. Sorry to waste time with this,
take a
but
victory lap.
Some people didn't see this on Twitter, but this is my immediate reaction to the announcement that it was going to be hosted on Twitter. And as we were talking about, like anybody familiar with Twitter Spaces should have been able to make this bet.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will announce he is running for president, if you can believe it, during a Twitter Spaces discussion with Elon Musk on Wednesday night.
Colossal idiot.
Per NBC News. It's going to be really fun.
Can I place a bet?
They should recall his campaign, just like the Teslas.
Yeah.
Can I place a bet that Twitter Space will have some sort of technical difficulty?
Yeah. You should have placed a financial bet with like some Elon stan on Twitter, and then you would have been able to cash in. You can tell them it's really easy to identify them because of the blue checks. So Matt, 100% right. It totally was a complete disaster. Yes. We spoke about this. It was like 20 minutes of technical difficulties, and by the end, it was an embarrassingly low number for who was actually viewing this major presidential announcement. And just like we said this earlier, but now that you guys are here, the idea that you would announce a presidential run on an audio-only platform, which is equivalent to a conference call, where like this is supposed to be the moment where you fundraise the most, where you get the most excitement, and there's not even a visual component to it. Putting aside the fact that, like, of course it was predictably going to be full of glitches, just the concept of doing it with just your voice is a really bad sign for his political acumen.
I mean, FDR was doing audio-only content 90 years ago.
Right. That's what he's trying to harken back to, I guess. But let's play Trump's response then here. Now that we kind of did we get the one from True Social?
Yeah, which one do we want?
let's play the trolling first, because the immediate reactions here. This is what Trump put on social media.
So first there was like I saw the screenshot that he did this, where it was like the Twitter space with all these people: Ron DeSantis, Elon, including George Soros, Klaus Schwab, Dick Cheney, Adolf Hitler, the devil, and the FBI. And to be honest, I think he kind of should have just left it there, because that is as an image that's funny, but it was a video, and I'll say I think he kind of loses it in the final act here with a little like whoever wrote this is a little bit too like much of a fan of Trump than really embodying Trump, but they use AI for all the voices here, and it is kind of funny.
George, can you just wait while we...
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can all hear you, George. Can you just hold on for a second?
Hilfa, I don't think they can hear me.
I can hear you fine, George. Just speak to the
I don't think George knows how to use Twitter.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Can I please make my big announcement now? Everyone just...
Hello?
Just shut up, George.
Can somebody just mute George?
Dick, could you try not to cough on the...
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we going to take out Trump, you guys?
Guys from the FBI, this is not a private call. This is a public Twitter space. Everyone can listen in.
Oh.
God damn it.
Anyway, guys, we invited everyone to this Twitter space so Governor Ron DeSantis could...
Everyone just shut the hell up so I can make my announcement, okay?
Can you pause it for 1 second there? Like, what's funny about this so far is I think the DeSantis AI is a little bit stilted.
So is Elon's.
Well, the Elon's is stilted, but in a way that Elon is. Like, I think that sounds pretty true to Elon, like the ums and ahs and stuff.
Yeah, they got to work on the voice a little bit, I think. But yeah, mine's better.
Everyone to this Twitter space so Governor Ron DeSantis could...
Everyone just shut the hell up so I can make my announcement, okay?
You go, girl.
Wait, the devil is gay?
So what? Everyone in this call is gay.
Something
I happen to know every single one of you has a secret gay lover hidden in your closet.
Ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie
Guys, can we please just calm down?
So anyway, guys, I just wanted to announce that I'm...
Okay, I can hear the governor very well.
Shut up. Would you please shut up already? I'm running for fucking president, okay?
Yeah, we kind of already knew about it.
Know, Governor.
Congratulations, Governor.
Well, that concludes our Twitter space for today. Thank you to all of our...
Hold your horses, Elon. The real president is going to say a few words. The devil, I'm going to kick your ass very soon. Hitler, you're already dead. Dick Cheney sounds like you'll be joining Hitler very soon. Klaus Schwab and George Soros, I'm putting both your asses in jail. And Ron DeSanctimonious can kiss my big, beautiful 2024 presidential ass. Trump 2024, baby. Let's go.
All right, well...
I mean,
devil, I'm gonna kick your ass.
I think it sucks, but his fans probably love it.
The only commentary that we have here is just how much Trump is just so much better at politics. So much better.
Although I have a little bit more, is that I think it's funny, but I also think it is too insular. Like, it's too...
But the whole Republican Party's too insular.
But it wasn't in 2016, I don't think.
I agree. But, I mean...
That's what I'm saying. Like,
I'm not talking about their ambitions to win the presidency, but to win the primary.
Trump's absolutely... Yes, you're right.
Trump's crushing it.
The whole insular thing is the modern day Republican Party to a T, though. Like they're constantly making references to things that only very online, right wingers get. And they look at Nikki Haley in that speech the other day she was speaking at some moderate event, and she was like, "You all saw the Dylan Mulvaney thing? Bud Light, everyone."
Yeah, we'll play that later.
Trans people. She starts trashing trans people, and the audience is just completely quiet because either they don't know what she's talking about or they don't care, because these are just insular Republican right-wing culture war online issues.
But bigfooting DeSantis is a universal language for the Republicans, though. Mocking him and making him into a joke, that's the kind of strongman stuff that appeals to a Republican primary voter. So it's online, I get it, but not as online as announcing your presidential campaign on a damn Twitter space.
Right. I mean, that's what Trump's mocking in the video. The whole point is that it's happening on Twitter Spaces, right? Yeah.
So, do we have this other thing that he posted
Also,
too?
not to give too much credit to Trump, this is clearly something created by one of his crazy sycophant fans.
That's the
and
thing,
he just ripped it and uploaded it because he thought he liked it or something.
But we
Like, it's
have
not
his
like
statement now, right? Yes, good point there, Binder. But
So this is actually him, yeah. And like I said, I think it was just a little bit corny because it was made by a fan of his. But anyway, here is him actually talking to
the camera.
straight to Meatball.
When the Ron DeSanctimonious facts come out, you
Pause
will see
it, sorry. I am the only person who has been pro DeSanctimonious from day one.
You might have been right.
I love that it's still here. And, thank you, Mr. Trump. That's why you're president.
DeSanctimonious and his debacle. Debacle.
When the Ron DeSanctimonious facts come out, you will see that he's better than most Democrat governors, but very average at best compared to Republican governors who have done a fantastic job. How about the fact that he had the third most deaths of any state having to do with the China virus or COVID?
Yep,
Even
there it
Cuomo did better. He was number 4. He shut down everything, including the beaches. Other Republican governors didn't do that. They kept it open. It was their choice. I gave them all their choice. The Democrats blew it big. A lot of Republican governors did a fantastic job. And look at Disney and what a mess it is. Could have worked out an easy settlement, but no, he wanted to show the fake news how tough a guy he is. He's not. And the whole Disney thing is really very unfortunate. Now thousands and thousands of jobs are being stopped. And a lot of people are very upset about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of COVID deaths, also Disney, the two problems.
I like that Disney angle. He's like, I would have cut a deal. That's his thing.
Right.
Right. This is where he shines. This is exactly the atmosphere in which Trump does his best. And I think that in the primaries, there are going to be a lot of rising stars, and he's probably going to slap a lot of them down.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think DeSantis and Trump completely just crowds out everyone else. I think it's just going to be DeSantis and Trump. Like Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, the guy who's always on Fox News, Vivek, what's his name?
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy, who tried to extract money from a Politico reporter recently. Anyway.
But now people don't stand a chance between the Trump-DeSantis feud, even getting a word in edgewise.
Well, half of them are actually running as stalking horses for one of those two major ones, I think. But also, I do feel the need to correct the record. I appreciate that Trump, who is in part responsible for the development of the vaccine, thank you, Mr. Trump, is hitting DeSantis on the amount of COVID deaths that were in Florida. Not true that necessarily red states did better than blue states, and of course, Cuomo was bad and killed people with negligence. But I'll just say, as of March 10th, the number of deaths per 100,000 people. Here are the tops. The top state: Arizona. Next, Oklahoma. Next, Mississippi. Next, West Virginia, New Mexico, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Michigan, Kentucky, New Jersey. Then we get to Florida. Then Louisiana, Georgia. Then New York, Pennsylvania. So. I'll just say
is that per capita?
That's per 100,000.
Okay.
So we killed too many people with negligence during the pandemic. Ron DeSantis is absolutely representing the desire to act like we actually did too much. Trump is, I think, weakly straddling both of these. He's not only an anti-vaxxer, but he also did the vaccine. And he needs to nut up and lean into the fact that actually what he did with regards to shutting down shutting things down before there was a vaccine was actually responsible. Now, there should have been a lot more done. There should have been way more stimulus. There should have been expansion of healthcare or whatever. But this idea that DeSantis could hit him from the right on COVID, I think is appalling to me. And Trump deserves to lose if he can't meet that.
Right. Well, the problem for Trump is he might be the only Republican who openly admits that those people actually died from COVID and not something else. I mean,
yeah. Well, he calls it the China virus, so he's trying to rope in some jingoism there. But to be honest, I don't even think it matters that much, Matt. It's just if it comes out of his mouth, they're fine with it.
I think that's generally true.
And people don't care about COVID as much anymore as
I hope so. I hope that's right. But I want to see that proven over the course of this campaign.
And also, a lot of people, especially in the news, like politicians, leaned into COVID denialism in one form or another, especially right wingers, because it became unpalatable to openly support Trump after January 6th. And so, the anti-vaxxer stuff was initially just a coded way to show allegiance to Trump and sort of a larger bucket of conspiracies around January 6th and open up and freedom. How you get from it's Trump's vaccine to anti-vaxxerism is kind of confusing, but they were targeting the same people. And so I agree with Emma. Once pro-vaxxerism in some form that's still jingoistic, that's still reactionary comes out of his mouth, the vast majority of the people who were supporting DeSantis from the anti-vaxxer element are just going to run back under Trump. I don't think a lot of these people are true believer or anti-vaxxers.